What would you do if your child was standing right next to you and suddenly the school said she didn't exist? Not misplaced. Not absent. Not transferred. Erased. That's the word that still echoes in my head. Erased. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It happened on a Thursday night. Parent-teacher night. The kind of evening parents don't think twice about. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. Folding chairs scraping against linoleum floors. Parents smiling politely at each other while pretending not to compare their children's grades. Routine. Safe. Predictable. My daughter, Lila Carter, was 7 years old. She stood beside me in her purple sneakers, clutching her progress report with both hands like it was a trophy. She had spent the entire drive over telling me how her teacher said she was one of the most curious students in the class. She was proud, and I was proud of her. My name is Elena Carter. I'm 34. I'm a registered nurse, and I've spent my entire adult life believing in systems. Hospitals run on systems. Schools run on systems. Systems keep people safe. Or at least, that's what I thought. The classroom was crowded. Parents lining up, signing forms, asking questions about math scores and reading levels. The air smelled faintly of dry erase markers and cheap coffee from the hallway. Everything felt normal. Until it didn't. The school counselor, Ms. Rachel Bennett, sat behind her desk with a laptop open. She had that calm, practiced smile professionals use when they've done something 1,000 times. She greeted Lila warmly. "Hi, Lila. I heard you love science." Lila nodded, shy but glowing. Ms. Bennett began typing, scrolling, clicking through the system. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But then her fingers stopped. Not gradually. Not casually. They froze. Her eyes locked onto the screen. Her smile faded. Not dramatically. Just disappeared. Have you ever watched someone realize something they didn't expect to find? It's subtle. Almost invisible. But you feel it instantly. I felt it then. She clicked again. Slower this time. Her posture stiffened. The room around us kept moving. Parents talking. Papers shuffling. Chairs scraping. But inside that moment, everything went quiet. She leaned closer to the screen and whispered something that made my brain refuse to process it. "Ma'am, her name isn't in the system anymore." I laughed. Just once. Because it didn't make sense. Because it couldn't make sense. But then Ms. Bennett scrolled down further. And her face changed in a way I will never forget. She looked at me, then at Lila, then back at the screen. And in a lower voice, barely audible, she said, "Who changed her emergency contact yesterday? The system says she's not mine." If your child's school suddenly showed someone else as their guardian, would you panic immediately? Or would you do what I did? Freeze first. Because panic comes later. Panic needs confirmation. Panic needs proof. And in that moment, my brain was still trying to convince itself this was just a glitch. Computers glitch all the time, right? Systems crash. Records lag. Names disappear and reappear after refresh. That's what I told myself. Ms. Bennett's fingers hovered over the keyboard like she wasn't sure if she should keep touching it. Her eyes flicked toward Lila, who was now quietly drawing a flower on the corner of her report with a pink pen she'd brought from home. She was completely unaware that something invisible had just shifted around her. "Can you print it?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded calm, controlled, professional. The same voice I use with patients when something is wrong but I don't want to scare them. Ms. Bennett hesitated, just for half a second. Then she nodded and clicked print. The printer sat behind her on a small wooden cabinet. It whirred to life, the mechanical hum slicing through the noise of the classroom. That sound felt louder than everything else. Louder than the parents talking. Louder than the chairs scraping. Because that piece of paper wasn't just paper. It was evidence. She handed it to me carefully, like it might break. At the top, everything looked normal. Student name, Lila Carter. Grade, 2nd. Status, active. Active. She was still active. Still enrolled. Still real. But then I looked lower. Emergency contact, primary guardian. Daniel Mercer. Age 41. I stared at the name. I didn't recognize it. Not immediately. Not consciously. It sat there in plain black text like it had always belonged. Like it had always been true. Except it wasn't. I had filled out every single enrollment form myself. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table 2 years earlier, double-checking every line. Emergency contacts. Phone numbers. Authorized pickups. My name. Only my name. And yet here it was. Someone else. Inserted into a role that belonged to me. Mommy? Lila said softly, tugging my sleeve. Did I do something wrong? Her voice snapped something inside my chest. I forced a smile. The kind parents master even when their insides are collapsing. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. But Ms. Bennett was still staring at the screen. She leaned closer and whispered something that made my stomach tighten. This change was made yesterday. At exactly 3:17 p.m. Yesterday. At 3:17 p.m., I had been at the hospital. Halfway through a 12-hour shift. Administering medication to a patient recovering from surgery. I hadn't touched a computer here. I hadn't logged in. Which meant only one thing. Someone else had. Ms. Bennett clicked another tab. Her brow furrowed deeper. The system says the changes were made using an authorized parent login. She paused. Then looked directly at me. Your login. And suddenly, this wasn't a glitch anymore. It was access. How does someone steal your place in your own child's life, without ever touching you? Not physically. Not loudly. Just, digitally. That was the part that terrified me most. Not the name itself. Not yet. But the method. Because systems don't guess passwords. They don't randomly assign strangers as guardians. They only respond to access. Authorized access. Ms. Bennett turned the laptop slightly so I could see the screen. The parent portal interface looked exactly like the one I'd used dozens of times before. Same layout. Same blue and gray colors. Same familiar dashboard. Except now, it was showing something that didn't belong. Would you like to log in yourself? She asked gently. I nodded. My fingers felt heavier than usual as I pulled out my phone. I opened the school app. Entered my email. Entered my password. I expected it to fail. Part of me wanted it to fail. Because if it rejected my password, that would mean something external had happened. A breach. A hack. Something explainable. But it didn't fail. It logged in instantly. Like nothing was wrong. Like everything was normal. Except it wasn't. I tapped this student information tab. My eyes scanned the screen automatically, looking for familiarity. Name. Grade. Teacher. Then I saw it. Primary guardian. Daniel Mercer. Not below my name. Not beside my name. Instead of my name. My chest tightened. It wasn't just the emergency contact field. The system now recognized him as the primary guardian. Me, as secondary. Replaced. Reordered. Demoted. Wait, I said quietly. Scroll down. Ms. Bennett navigated to something called activity history. Every parent portal keeps logs. Time-stamped records of every change. Every login. Every edit. Digital footprints. Impossible to erase without administrative clearance. She clicked. A list appeared. Login 3:14 p.m. Guardian information edited 3:17 p.m. Emergency contact updated 3:18 p.m. Authorized pickup added 3:19 p.m. For minutes. That's all it took. For minutes for someone to sit somewhere, open their device, log in as me, and begin rearranging my daughter's reality. Have you ever realized how fragile identity can be? We think it's permanent, official, protected. But here it was. Changed in under 5. Ms. Bennett scrolled further. Her voice lowered. There's one more thing. She pointed at a line near the bottom. Authorized pickup permission. Daniel Mercer. Access level. Full guardian authorization. Verification requirement. None. None. That word hit harder than everything else. None meant if he walked into this school, the system would allow him to take her. No questions. No calls. No verification. My stomach dropped. Because this wasn't just about names anymore. This was access to my child. And then Ms. Bennett asked the question that cracked open something buried deep in my memory. Do you know anyone named Daniel Mercer? The answer should have been no. It should have been immediate. Simple. Final. But it wasn't. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, that name had already begun waking up. Do you believe people can truly disappear from your life? Not drift away. Not fade slowly. But vanish so completely that you convince yourself they never mattered in the first place. I used to believe that. Until I heard his name again. Daniel Mercer. At first, I stared at the screen like it belonged to someone else's life. Like it was a coincidence. Like it was just a name that happened to match someone I used to know. But deep down, my body already knew the truth before my mind accepted it. Daniel Mercer wasn't a stranger. He was my past. 8 years ago, he had been my future. He was 33 when we met. Confident. Quiet. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke, which made his words feel more important when he finally said them. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He worked in IT security for a regional logistics company. He understood systems, networks, access. Back then, that had impressed me. Now, it terrified me. We dated for 2 years. He proposed when I was 26. I remember the exact restaurant, the exact table, the exact moment I said yes. And then, 3 months later, he left. No argument. No warning. Just distance. He said he wasn't ready for responsibility. Said he needed space. Said it was better this way. Within weeks, he was gone. New phone number. New apartment. No forwarding address. And by the time I found out I was pregnant with Lila, he had already erased himself. I never told him. Not because I wanted to hide her, but because he had made his choice. He walked away. He disappeared. Or at least, I thought he did. Ms. Bennett's voice pulled me back into the present. Elena. I realized I hadn't answered her question. Do you know anyone named Daniel Mercer? My mouth felt dry. Yes, I said quietly. I used to. The words hung in the air between us. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight behind them. Then she clicked one more field. Her expression shifted again. Concern. Real concern. She turned the screen toward me and pointed at something I hadn't noticed before. Login location. IP address origin. Local network. Estimated distance, 1.8 miles. I stared at it. He wasn't in another state. He wasn't across the country. He was here. Nearby. Close enough to access the school's network without triggering a security alert. Close enough to watch. Close enough to act. My phone vibrated suddenly in my hand. Unknown number. I stared at the screen. A single message appeared. 3 words. I miss her. My heart stopped. Because that message answered the one question I hadn't dared to ask. He knew about Lila. And now, he was reaching in. What do you do when the past finds your child before you can protect her from it? I stared at the message. I miss her. Not hello. Not how are you. Not even my name. Her. He had skipped me completely. Like I was just an obstacle between him and something he believed belonged to him. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself to stay calm. Because panic wouldn't help Lila. Panic wouldn't fix access logs or erase permissions or close whatever door he had just opened. Control would. Action would. I locked my phone and looked up at Miss Bennett. I need this reversed, I said. My voice didn't crack. It didn't tremble. It came out steady, precise. The same tone I use when making critical decisions at the hospital. She nodded immediately. We can flag the account, she said. But full reversal requires administrative authorization. The principal will need to approve it first thing in the morning. Morning. That meant tonight. The system still recognized him. Tonight, somewhere within 2 miles, Daniel Mercer existed inside my daughter's official records. Not physically here, but present enough, real enough, recognized enough. I looked across the classroom. Lila was sitting at a small desk, swinging her legs gently, completely absorbed in coloring a butterfly. She looked up and smiled at me, unaware of how fragile systems really are. Unaware that identity could be edited, rearranged, rewritten. 7 years of bedtime stories. 7 years of scraped knees. 7 years of being the only parent she had ever known. And in 4 minutes, someone had tried to digitally insert themselves into her life. But here's the truth nobody talks about. Systems are powerful, but they are not final. Because behind every system, there are people. People who can fix it. People who can fight it. People who refuse to let it define their reality. I walked over and took Lila's hand. She looked up at me. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. Are we going home now? I smiled. Yes, because home wasn't a database. It wasn't a login. It wasn't a permission field. It was me. And whoever Daniel Mercer thought he was. Whatever he thought he could claim. He was too late. But as we stepped out into the dark parking lot that night, my phone buzzed again. Another message. This one longer. I never stopped watching. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't over.